we want you to consider the power of the daydream for the pleasure of the daydream as compared to the daydream for the purpose of controlling reality. Such a big distinction. Because deliberate creators like you, and Esther too, sometimes you give up your true power by shifting into your humanness, and we are just wanting to soothe that human tendency, because there's a big difference between tapping in to your true power and being in the receptive mode and from a place of things not quite being there. So the question that we are encouraging you to ask yourself, this is the way we've put it to Esther, because she's getting really determined about following impulse. And so we're just asking her to be more keenly aware of, am I really under the influence of source when that impulse comes? Or am I under the influence of something else when that impulse comes? Because the impulses are going to keep coming. And what you begin to notice is the impulse to act doesn't come as often when you're under the influence of source, because you don't see yourself as the facilitator, the agitator, the corrector, the fixer, the making it happener. You see yourself more as the dreamer, as the pointer, as the guide. You're not justifying. And as you're stepping into this awareness of this higher power, you almost have to give up the sense that you need to do something. You see, this conversation is magnificent in so many ways, because your reality wasn't completely satisfying. Your reality was lacking enough of the things that you wanted, that you developed the ability to look beyond what is into something else. Do you think you knew that and that's why you daydreamed? Or do you think the daydreams made you feel that? Do you think that you knew that, so you daydreamed it into being, you daydreamed your power into being? Or do you think your current reality was just missing enough things that had caused you to create a vortex that was full of things, and that somehow in that relaxed state of letting go, that you actually, without even knowing how you did it, allowed your vibration to rise to that place of connection, and then you began receiving the true picture? Can you hear how those daydreams are made from the ingredients that are in your vortex? So verbalize the epiphany. I'm a powerful creator. My thoughts create. I must have been tuned in before I even realized I was tuned in. I understood this Abraham stuff before I ever heard a word from Abraham. That's a powerful statement. And apply it not just to Abraham, but individually apply that to your inner beings. You don't teach me. You're not trying to create my reality. You are there validating the reality that I'm creating. And in validating, can we add some words to that? Such as, you are acknowledging my worthiness. You are blessing me with your understanding of who I really am. Esther is discovering, Jerry has reemerged in the non-physical, and he is in that place of non-resistant thought. And so Esther is, on a daily basis, reconciling what he now knows with what he then knew. But this is the distinction that we want to apply to her and to you. The distinction between what he now knows and what he then knew. Say it better. What he now knows and what Esther thought he knew. Because what he knew and Esther's perception of it are not the same thing. You could tap into your source energy, as you often do, and you can know what you know. We know you get this. And this is the most powerful thing about this conversation that we'd like all of you to pick up on, is that you have all created what will one day be your now reality. And it's a wonderful thing to acknowledge it. But hear this. You did it through the steps. You did it through contrast, which was step one, which wasn't always that delicious from your standpoint. You put things into your vortex, and then you found ways to allow your vibration to rise, and you caught glimpses. But it's the combining of asking and maybe being out of sorts, and then source, who's never out of source, focusing until it comes into brighter beingness, and then you finding a way to allow it to come into being. And sometimes the more we teach deliberate creation, the more you move away from your true power, because you think that you've got to utilize that power in such a deliberate way that you don't let your true... You get it? It's like we want to put more emphasis on your discovering your worthiness while you diminish your responsibility. It's knowing your worthiness that lets the good stuff in. You already applied your responsibility when you were in step 1. Is that making a little bit of sense to you? When we say ask and it is given, and then we say it's given but you got to receive it. So ask and it is given, but is it allowed? So now step back into your perspective. All right, I'm being given something. And most humans click into a place that goes something like, have I earned it? Have I efforted enough to receive this? Because you're pinpointing the thing that is in the way of most people receiving more and more of the abundance that they absolutely deserve. But you've got lots of beliefs about what makes you deserve, because you've learned it from people who needed your cooperation to get from you what they needed to get from you, because they did not know about their higher power. If most of the world that is surrounding you thinks they're in competition for the good stuff and is looking for ways for those resources to come to them, then most everybody you know has trained you in some way to believe that in order to receive that you have to give, and that in order to be worthy you have to jump through these hoops. And there are very few humans who really understand. More and more are coming, and there have been all along those that have those epiphanies. But it's such a wonderful thing when you realize that the system, if you want to call it that, the way that it is, that the non-physical energies, that the abundance and well-being is showering down around you, but you've got to find some way of letting it in. And you are fine-tuning here. Worthiness is a word that gets stuck in most people's throat. In other words, you don't even know what to do with it, because a lot of times you first heard it in a religious context when your worthiness was dependent upon some behavioral response, which was dependent upon some rules that somebody else set out for you. And your worthiness usually required some sacrifice of something that you wanted. It has been taught in such a backwards fashion. And the worst part of the way that it has been taught in your physical environment is it implies that you're not already there, that you were born not there, and that now somehow you have to find some way to get there in an environment that won't possibly let you get there. It's like you can't win in that game. Because think about law of attraction. If the premise is you are not worthy and you must do things to make yourself more worthy, so go to it, isn't everything that you do to make yourself more worthy from an unworthy position going to make you more unworthy? That's how law of attraction works. You can't get there from there. And yet you can't just jump into the assumption without some thread that you are worthy. That's too big of a leap for most humans to make who have been born into an environment that's been teaching otherwise, you see. And so it's like with so many things that happen in an environment like this. If you are new at it, it doesn't matter. If you are in an audience watching Esther and hearing the clarity of her words and the consistency of her words, they're our words, but they're her words of our intent that she's finding words for. You might leave a gathering like this or sit in the midst of it and think, well, that woman, whoever she is, sure believes what she's saying, and she's loud. But it isn't until you have your own epiphany. It isn't until you somehow find your own alignment with this energy so that that clarity is yours, that any of this really is very meaningful to you. And so the big elephant in the room that this conversation keeps pointing back to, it's so big you can see it, but it isn't obvious to most people, is that you have to be in the receiving mode in order to know who you are. But most of you are not in the receiving mode because of the physical environment that you have been fostered in or that you're even standing in. And so the question that we are always wanting to find an answer to, the thing that is at the basis of nearly every discussion that we have, is how can we get you to not remember who you are, because we don't want you to use your memory, because that takes you back into your physical blockages. How can you tap into who you really are? That's why the discussion is moving slightly from, instead of following the path of least resistance, finding moments of no resistance and recognizing that that's what they are, and then deciding to make most of your decisions from a place when you know you're in no resistance. Because you work so hard to try to work your way out of problems. You work so hard to find answers. You get into these binds and you just struggle looking for the answers. We're talking about humanity in general. You get yourself into a dilemma or into a situation where you are not enjoying what's happening, and then you try to think your way out of it. And you can't think your way out of a situation unless you're under the influence of Source. You're just going to think yourself deeper in. That's what we mean when we say you're not ever going to get to the bottom of it, because there's no bottom. It just will become more and more and more and more and more. So when we talk about the worthiness issue, you're not ever going to get to a place of worthiness when you're starting from a premise of unworthiness. How can I be more worthy? Well, what's the premise? I'm not worthy, therefore I want to be more worthy. So what are we reaching for? A moment in time when you don't feel unworthy. Follow? A moment in time when you don't feel unworthy. You haven't dug yourself in a hole that you're trying to climb out of. Because when you try to dig yourself out of a hole, the hole gets deeper. You can't dig your way out of a hole. So you want to find a moment in time when you don't feel unworthy. That's how your inner being always feels about you. Your inner being knows your value, your incredible value and worth. Let us say it this way. Anytime you're not doing that thing that you do that keeps you from feeling worthy, you feel worthy, which is hardly ever. I create my own reality. The question is, in moments in which I create my own reality, am I under the influence of Source or something else? You create a whole lot of your reality when you are having contrast. Whoa, think about that. You're in contrast, not even liking it, and putting things in your vortex. And so I create my own reality. Let's use some different words. I create my own reality often in step one. But when do I allow my own reality? What does it feel like when I'm allowing my own reality? And can you imagine the delightful moments in time? Can you imagine what it feels like when you're having a contrasting moment? And because you understand this all so well, you're not pushing against yourself in an attitude of unworthiness, but you're embracing the contrast because you know you were born from it. Whew. Feel that? I create my own reality, and often I create my own reality from an unpleasant situation that I formerly have wanted to beat up on myself about. Or did I create my own reality in step one moments, which caused things to go into the vortex, and now I'm allowing my own reality in my daydream? Keep creating, because you've got to bang around with other people and you're going to have all kinds of experiences, and you came for that, and it's all good. We just want you to call it all good. If you would just add more conscious, deliberate daydreaming, more conscious, deliberate allowing your vibration to rise. You just want to find more ways to introduce more step 3 moments into your experience in order to utilize the awesome power of non-resisted thought. There's awesome power when you are in resistance, because you are launching these rockets of desires. But it is only because of your inner being's ability to focus on the rockets that you've launched that they take hold, that they take root, that they continue to gestate and are nurtured and growing. Do you see what we're getting at?